Okay, so welcome everyone to this medical student panel. I'm happy that you all are able to be here, and thank you for the panelists as well for taking time out of your busy days to be here. So my name is Crystal Peña. I am an undergrad, or I was an undergrad. I graduated in 2019 with my bachelor's in public health, and I am currently in my gap year, preparing to apply to MD PhD programs, so I can pursue an MD and a PhD in epidemiology. That's the goal for me, and I'm doing these panels just to kind of break down those barriers that we have in getting this information and learning how to navigate this whole system, which is especially difficult if you are a first generation student pursuing medicine, or if no one in your family is in the medical field. It makes it really hard for you to learn how to navigate the system. And so we're going to hear from these great speakers about how they've overcome obstacles in their careers and how they've been able to get into medical school, and all of that good stuff. So we can start off with Maria. Maria, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, you can say your name, your institution, and something else about you. So I'm going to put myself on mute.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm happy to be here with all of you, and thanks Crystal for inviting us. Well, my name is Maria Jose. I am from Colombia. I am currently in my final year of medical school in Colombia. And well, I pursue a career in internal medicine, which is why I want to take all the steps and then apply for residency in the United States. I guess that's it.
Gracia, you can go next.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Gracia. I am a fourth-year medical student here at the University of Michigan. I am originally from Stamford, Connecticut. It's a small city just outside of New York City. I am the daughter of two immigrants from Guatemala, and I am gearing up to apply to general surgery residency in less than a month. I'm really grateful to be here.
And last but not least, Alan.
Hi, thank you so much for having us, Crystal. My name is Alan. I'm originally from Mexico City, born and raised. I came to the US a little bit before high school. I am currently a first year at Weill Cornell Medical College in New York City. I'm already here on the Upper East Side. About half of my classmates though aren't in New York yet. A little bit about me though, before this, I still do actually, I'm a litigation attorney. So I went to law school at UCLA. And I practiced about 9 years before starting medical school. So that's a little bit about me.
All right, and thank you all for introducing yourselves. So the way this is going to go is that I'm going to ask a couple questions to each of you, more individualized questions based off of your journey. And then we'll go with some more general questions and we'll open it up for a Q&A. So I'll start off with Alan. So because you were formerly a lawyer, you are more so of a non-traditional student. How did you navigate that? Not knowing much about the medical field maybe, or how did you inform yourself of everything that you had to do to try to prepare yourself to be a successful applicant?
I think the major difficulty in being a non-traditional student applicant is that you don't fit into the boxes that admission committees are looking for. So you really do have to start early, talking to people that have gone through the process to see how best you can fit these boxes while also advertising what makes you unique. It's a strength. If you're a non-trad student, I think there's great strength to that. You bring a lot of your past career, your past experiences to you. And you bring a lot of responsibility that you've carried on in those experiences, whereas undergrads have only the experience of grades in school. You have actual life responsibility. So it's really important to bring that forward. I wasn't discouraged too much, I think, because of my age. I think that's a little unique for me. I think because I'm a man. I think if I was a woman, I think that'd be very different. I've talked to a lot of non-trad female applicants, women applicants that say, well, you know, I'm 28, 29, and they're saying, well, don't you want to have a family already? Like all this stuff that are kind of just kind of like, you know, like sexism really. So don't get discouraged. So, you know, it's never too late. If you want to have this dream, go for it. You only live once, I think, so might as well do what you want to do.
I love that. I love that. And also considering that you are an immigrant and you came over here a bit before high school, I think we said, did that create any additional barriers for you or obstacles, and how are you able to overcome those? Maybe like what suggestions would you give that to students that are in your shoes and that are immigrants as well?
I was lucky in that my mom always encouraged me to like go to school, but the problem is that she would encourage me, and then I would get to these situations like college, and then I would like have nowhere else to go to. And I had no idea where to turn to for advice, for resources, for just direction generally. So I think as an immigrant, that's a big obstacle, just knowing what to do, knowing why you're supposed to do that. You know, my mom kept advocating education, education, education. Okay, but why? You know, like what's the driving force? What's going to make you do it so that you're happy down the road? You know, 3 years in, 5 years in. So again, I think if you're an immigrant and that's your background, you again need to start building a network of resources, people that have had those experiences and that have gone through the path that you are now embarking on, so that you can realize that it's hard and it's okay that it's hard and that you will struggle because others have struggled, and you belong. I think that's the main mindset that you need to have as an immigrant, that yes, you belong.
Yeah, and I think that's relatable too. I guess like first generation students in general, like first generation to do college or like medical school, it's like learning how to navigate the system is like difficult, and it's a struggle. Gracia or Maria, do you have anything to comment on that? Like learning how to navigate the system?
Yeah, it's a challenging thing to point out, because I think I can share my journey, and I'm sure Alan and Maria Jose will also do the same. I think I will often come back to the theme of mentors, and like I strongly believe that individual people can make a big impact on you. And I think as a student, as an applicant, time and again, I think part of what has made my journey successful has been just kind of looking for those people, and like being ready to be vulnerable and share about myself. So because I think building a relationship with someone makes them invested in you, and it's hard, like even for people who are not first gen students, who are not children of immigrants, who grow up like in, you know, a family that has resources. Like if they don't have parents in medicine, it's hard to know like how to navigate the system. And so when you don't have those resources, it's that much more challenging. I think that that's what makes this kind of panel really impactful. And I also think there are a lot of opportunities to network now that didn't necessarily exist even like 5 years ago. Like Twitter, I think, is an awesome way to network with people. And I've been both on like the giving end and receiving end of mentorship over Twitter, which is awesome. And so I definitely think the other component of this, whether you know, you're a pre-medical student or an applicant who chooses to reach out to people who you don't know particularly well, like over Twitter or over email or something like that, or if you're reaching out to an established mentor of yours, I think any of those avenues, a key point is just being courageous enough to ask all of your questions, even if they seem like silly questions. And the reason why is like knowledge is power, and like with information of how things work, then you'll be able to kind of make decisions based on your priorities and your experience. Certainly, like Alan talked about his mom being super supportive in his pursuit of education, and I think I've also been very lucky in that regard. But I do also know that like there are moments when that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. Like I did a year, I did a year of work between college and medical school, which for me was as much like a, time to work on my application so that I could, separate work and school. I felt like I would be overwhelmed by filling out med school applications while I was a senior in college. But the other component of that was like, I don't have money and I need a job and I need to pay for these applications. So there were like multiple reasons why I thought this was a good idea. And it was a good idea for me. That being said, my parents who don't have college educations were like, Gracia, like, no, like if you stop this path now, something is going to happen, because that was their own experience. Like they never got to either start or finish college, and life got in the way and it never happened. And so I think they like very much had that fear for me, and it was challenging for me to kind of, I like want, I mean, we're Latinos and like have like a very strong sense of family, and I didn't want to do something without my parents' support. But I think like I would again encourage students to like be courageous in asking questions and be courageous in sharing information with your families, because if you're someone like me who just finds like solace and strength in feeling like my family is behind me, I think that it is like absolutely worth it. Yeah.
I think what Gracia said is actually really important. The being courageous part, because what happens in med school is that there are two different things, like the one you imagine it is going to be like, and like actually going through it, and what it is actually like studying medicine. So maybe you start with some thoughts you have what it's going to be like, and then you go through it and you realize it's not the same. So being courageous is something really important to be able to finish med school, and also being open to ask questions, touch some doors, like we would say in Colombia, like be able to look for opportunities. So I guess that's really important to be able to meet people, and also do whatever you want to do, if it's research or if it's to manage patients. So I guess being courageous and asking for questions is really, really important.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And then I feel like this is kind of leading up to somewhat of like mental health. And I know with Gracia, we talked a lot about that. Like there's going to be some things thrown at you that you totally do not expect. Medical school is hard. And so I've heard, haven't experienced it for myself yet. But Gracia, would you like to share a little bit of maybe how you can take care of your mental health and finding that balance, and maybe any suggestions you would give to students?
Yeah, this is a super, super important topic, and it's a challenging one because there's no like easy recipe to accomplish this. I would say the most important thing is to make this a deliberate priority for yourself. The same way you like tell yourself you're gonna brush your teeth every day, and it's just the thing you do because you got to do it. Prioritizing your mental health is something that I think is a habit. And I will speak for myself in saying that I didn't really think about that before coming to medical school, because I guess I had been lucky and privileged enough to never struggle too much with my mental health before medical school. But I wish it was something that I kind of knew to incorporate into my life prior to medical school. So that's point one. Point two, I think, is, the ever-present imposter syndrome that we all struggle with. You get to medical school and maybe you feel like you totally deserved it, and maybe you feel like you have no idea how you got there. Regardless of where you are on that spectrum, you will find yourself in a moment where you're like, I'm surrounded by people who know way more than I do, who are much more qualified than I am, and what am I doing here? And and then, for speaking for myself, there's this added component of like, I'm a disappointment, like my family, you know, like I don't want to disappoint my family. You know, instead of being home, I'm like hundreds of miles away. And here I am, like spending all my time studying, and I feel like I have nothing to show for it. And I think that kind of leads to the second point of time and again, I think it's very easy to slip into putting your like personal value in your accomplishments. You know, and certainly like I think when you are someone who goes into medicine and likes studying and is somewhat nerdy and likes science and likes learning, like of course we all feel kind of a rush of pride when we, you know, do well on a test, or when you have an accomplishment, you know, that you achieved, which you should. And I think that that's important. But I think the caveat to that is, you know, when you have a failure or when you don't accomplish something the way that you did, like really trying not to think less of yourself and reminding yourself that no one else in the world thinks less of you because of that is really, really important. And the third point I'll say, even though I could talk about this stuff all day, but the third point, and I think the most important point, is to, again, be courageous in being open about where you're at. I think it's very, very frequent that, you know, you are struggling and it looks like everyone else around you is fine, and therefore you don't want to open the door to a conversation that includes you disclosing the fact that you're having a hard time. I think very, very often, you know, you'll be in the halls of the hospital and someone will be like, hey, how's it going? Oh, I'm great. And like, you're not great, but you know, you just like, you want to pretend like it's fine. Maybe because you want to convince yourself it's fine, but certainly because you don't want anyone else to know that maybe things aren't fine. And I would encourage you to try to be honest. You know, like if something horrible happened and like a patient of yours passed away, or you're struggling in class or whatever, like, you know, it's okay to be like, you know, I'm having a really tough time this week. That's okay. And for your own mental health, that takes off the burden of, you know, putting on a mask or hiding something, you know. And you'll find, at least I have found, that once I started kind of being very open about how I was doing and like being open about my struggles, I struggled with some depression my first year of medical school. But since that experience, people are very open to me back. And it's kind of beautiful in a way, because all of a sudden you realize you're not alone. Like people wait for you to show your courage, and then they'll reciprocate. And it's like a really wonderful way to build community. And I think community is just like such an important aspect of getting through med school successfully.
And Maria or Jose, have you faced any issues with imposter syndrome, and how have you overcome it?
Okay, obviously, yes. I mean, I think it's something that everybody faces, especially women. Um, but I like Gracia. I don't think it's just there's just one magical way to overcome it, but rather many tips, like be able to acknowledge, well, in the case of mental health, be able to acknowledge when you need professional help is really important. Like if you need to go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, that's okay and that's valid, and maybe that's what you need in order to feel better, do better in life. So don't be afraid to actually look for professional help. Is one thing, because imposter syndrome may be just a manifestation of another mental health or mental illness. So be able to be open to acknowledge that you may need professional help is one way to overcome it. And another important thing is to acknowledge that your path is your own path. That I know it sounds cheesy, but no one is like you on earth. So you are unique, and the things you are doing, no one else is doing it. So you have to acknowledge yourself for every little effort you are making in order to be a doctor, and acknowledge the fact that you read, I don't know, one page today, because that's one page more that you read. So that's great. So enjoying those little achievements. It's also that it's really important to overcome imposter syndrome, and knowing that your path is valid and is great, and that you may face some struggles along the way, but if you cultivate resilience, you may be able to overcome some of them, and some of them you won't, because you are human. So acknowledge the fact that you are human and that you can do it, and that you, if you cannot do it, then you will be able to try at least. So I guess that's another important thing.
Just to add to that, it's so easy for our community, Latino community, people of color, to hit this imposter syndrome because at medical schools here in the US, it's such a white space. There's so few of us there that you already feel like, well, there's not that many of us. And then you struggle. So then you feel like, well, there should be that many of us kind of thing. You have this doubt, this like little tiny doubt. And no, you do belong there. And it's systemic why there's so few of us there. And being in such white space for me, and I know for some other people that I've known, does drain you emotionally. Does drain you your well-being, because you're not home in a way. You're in a community that has really not really thought about the issues that you've dealt with your whole life. It's very hard to talk about those issues openly with other people that that have both their parents are doctors and they teach a class your third year, like one of my classmates does. One of their parents is a professor at my school. So different experiences can really lead to that imposter syndrome when you fail, because you will fail. And I think that's the biggest lesson that I learned as an attorney, that it'd be great if life was just like this, but really it's like this. And you got to take those valleys, you got to learn from them, and you have to come get up the next day and try again, because there's going to be some difficulties, there's going to be some hard times. And it's okay. It's okay for that to happen. It's okay for you to be human and struggle. That's totally normal.
Thank you for that. Yes, definitely agree 100% with all three of you. And Maria Jose, do you maybe want to talk about how your experience has been studying medicine in Colombia, and maybe some of the differences? I know we talked about some of the differences when we met, but differences in studying medicine over there versus here.
Okay, so from what I understand, you do like 4 years there, and then you apply for residency, and the first 2 years are for basic sciences, and the other two like clinical electives. That's right, I think. So here we do like 6 to 7 years, depending on the university, just for med school. And the first 3 years are for basic sciences, and the other 3 years are for clinical electives. And these last 3 years include a year that we call internship, in which you are basically a slave. Basically a slave. You spend all the time in the hospital, and you have no specialty, but you simply rotate through all the general specialties. You don't do like super specialties like rheumatology or any of this, but just more general ones. And then after you finish med school, you can work as a general physician, or you can apply to residency. Um, the same types of specialties that you have there, we have here. But I guess the reason I want to do internal medicine there is because it offers a great opportunity to be able to like try a new thing and get out of my comfort zone. Medicine here is really great in a way that we really focus a lot in physical exam, because we are a developing country, so we don't do like a bunch of tests maybe that you could afford doing there, and we do more like physical exams, and interrogation is more like the gold standard for diagnosing patients. So maybe that would be a difference. And another important thing is that we did not produce like so many medical literature like you do there, and that's another factor I have in mind when I think of the reasons why I want to study internal medicine there, because you do way more research. So that's really important to me as well. I guess I don't know what other difference would you like to know.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And how are you navigating like trying to come to the US? So how are you learning what you have to do? Like how did you even know you had to take the steps to come over here to the US? Like where are you getting your information from? Because I think it is like hard to navigate the system, especially if you're in a whole other country. It would be really hard to figure out how to become a doctor over here.
Okay, so first thing I have to say, like, God bless the internet, because that's the only way I have been able to find information. Um, so I have never been to the United States actually, and so I kind of typed on Google USMLE and a lot of information came in, and I started reading about it and watching YouTube videos. And there are actually a few students in my university who have gone through these processes. So they actually explained to me a lot, and I decided like today is going to be the day I'm going to start studying for step one, and so I did. I am currently studying for it, and I guess the most important thing or advice I would say to anyone who wants to do the same is to ask, because the information is there. You can ask anybody who has gone through the process, or you can ask the internet, and you will know information is there. So be courageous to look for it, because you can do these things, and if you plan on doing that, you should pursue it, no matter what anybody tells you, or if someone tells you that you cannot do it or that no one has done it. You should be the first thing. So I guess internet is really important to finding information.
I like that. I like that. I think that's also how I first kind of was able to grasp what it takes to get into medical school. I think I looked up like how to be a doctor, and I think it was called like WikiHow or something, gave me a list of things to do. And so I wrote it on a notebook, and I had all these little boxes I was going to check, like 3.5 and above, join extracurriculars. But that was the first time too that I like found out what it, or like that's how I tried to figure out how I was supposed to get into medical school. And I guess in terms of like studying and motivation, it is often heard that medical students spend their whole life studying. How do you all find the motivation to sit for long periods of time and study? Especially now with Zoom and online classes, you're probably sitting there all day. So whoever wants to go first can take a stab at it. But
I definitely feel like there's two phases of med school, and they have very different kind of flavors of studying. So the preclinical phase of medical school, you're doing a lot of the science, just like learning, and you truly are just sitting, whether you're an in-person lecture or on Zoom or streaming lectures, like it's just a lot of sitting and memorizing. And for me personally, as someone who went into medicine because I was really drawn by the patient care, that was particularly challenging, I think, to motivate myself, because it felt very distant at times from why I was here. And so in those moments, like I personally found that taking small breaks to do things that centered myself were really helpful. And so, for example, for me, that included volunteering at the student-run free clinic. And it also included just like investing time in building relationships with the people that you're in med school with, because odds are you'll find classmates and eventually friends who care about the things that you care about and will remind you why you're there and why it's worth it in the moments when it's hard to remind yourself of that. The other thing I'll say is that once you do kind of get into the clinical space, you still have to study. Like, we have shelf exams at the end of each rotation. And so like, that's like another flavor of kind of stress, is like, oh my goodness, I was in the hospital for like 12, 13 hours today, and I still have to go home and study for this test. And that's kind of daunting. But reminding yourself that when you're in the hospital, like, have full presence of mind, and also you're learning. Like, you might not be reading a textbook, but you're learning from your experience, like taking care of patients and from being on rounds and paying attention. So like, you know, the other part of that was just like learning to trust your brain that it's absorbing things. And like, you know, like Maria Jose was saying, like, you read like one page of your textbook or do like 5 practice questions in a given night because you're just pooped. That's okay. Like, that really is okay. And like taking care of yourself and just listening to your body. If your body is like, I need to sleep, sleep. Like, it's okay. You can like sleep for a night and like pick up where you left off the next day. I definitely think I've learned for myself, especially like as you're in med school, regardless of how young or less young you were when you start med school, like, it's like at least 4 years. So you get older over time, and you'll find that your body needs more sleep. And so I actually feel like even as I've had more responsibility each year, I've gotten better and better at prioritizing like sleeping enough and exercising a few times a week. And like, I think that's a skill, but it also comes with like just kind of learning your priorities. And my priorities over time have been like, if I am in good, like in a good mental state and I feel good and I'm taking care of myself, even if I have 1 or 2 hours less a day to study, I'm like, it's a better set of hours that I'm studying. So I would encourage that mindset too.
I just want to speak a little bit about like the time that we are in right now. Like, we're living through a pandemic. Like, it's hard. It's hard. And there's a lot of personal outside in the world issues outside of medical school that are going on with people, that have happened to me and my family, that have happened to people that I know. So I just want to take a moment to say, like, right now, if there's a day where you just weren't very productive, you couldn't focus, like, it's okay. Like, we are living through a terrible time right now. I think it's okay to have off days in this time. And even when, you know, we go hopefully one day back to after COVID, like, it's okay to have off days, just get back in there. For me, I'm like in the midst of the preclinical, like, you know, kind of like load of information. It's just a lot of information. We have these weekly quizzes. And for me, this past week was just like a lot of biochemistry and anatomy, just like tons of it. So for me, that's really hard. Like, biochemistry, that's not my, you know, that's not my forte. That's not what I've done. Whereas some of my classmates, for example, have done research for several years, or they've done, or they majored in physics or in, you know, or in chemistry in undergrad, where I was like political science and philosophy. So there's like at the beginning, there's like these levels of people's knowledge, but as time goes on, it'll even out. You're all going to learn the same things. And then I want to echo something that Gracia said, is that last week I had my first kind of Zoom patient meeting, as in like I was there and the patient was actually talking to a doctor about his health issues, and just being able to see the actual real person that's on the other side, it just kind of encouraged me that that's why I'm doing all this work. That's why I'm studying so much every day. That's why I'm a little bit tired. I'm so tired on Fridays now. Because I'm doing it for that, so that I can help that individual. And if you get those experiences throughout med school, I think you will get, you know, a little soul recharge every once in a while to kind of put you through those long days, get you through those long days, and just take care of yourself, sleep, and drink some water. Yeah.
Maria Jose, do you want to add anything before we continue?
I think she froze on us.
I think so too. Oh, okay, maybe she'll join back in. And I guess we'll open it up for questions from any of the attendees that are here. If you all want to go ahead and ask something, you can unmute yourselves and turn on the camera if you'd like.
I have a question. Hi. Okay, so I was actually, I was pre-law at first. This is my second year of school. I was pre-law, and now I'm pre-med because I stopped running from medicine and decided that I wanted to pursue it. So Ellen, how did you kind of make the decision and kind of go back to school? And how did you do your prereqs? Like, how did you go from law classes to science classes? 'Cause, like, that's my hardest thing right now.
Yeah, it was a long journey for me because when I was an undergrad, no one ever said, maybe you can help people through science. Maybe take this biology class; it won't be so tough. I was just like, science, I don't know, that's not for me. Without even trying it. So I actually graduated undergrad. I started law school, and when I was in law school, my first year, I met some some first year med students that were there, and they were Mexican like me. They shared my immigrant story, and I just really admired them. And I saw them go through med school. I saw them start their residencies and become doctors. And then one day someone asked me while I was practicing law, they were like, what would you do if you won the lottery? And then without hesitating, I'd be like, oh, I'd go to med school. And then that idea, 3-4 months later, was like, man, that idea is still in my head. And then the following year, I was like, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. So I was at lunch and I walked over to the community college and I signed up for my first biology class. And it was very difficult because for 4.5 years, I was going to court in the mornings, practicing law during the day. And then at night, I was taking orgo, and I was taking physics, I was taking Gen Chem. It was tough. It was very tough. But that allowed me to still continue to develop my law practice while going to school. So community college, that's how I did mine. I did it at Chicago Community College. It was very affordable compared to doing, for example, a postbac. Postbacs are available for people that want to just get it all done in one shot. The only downside of that is that it's an extremely tough year. You're learning like Gen Chem for some programs. Instead of in 16 weeks, you're learning it in 4 weeks. And then, you're going on to the next step. And on top of that, because it's such a condensed program, you really have to be on top of everything, and your grades have to be really, really exemplary. So I did it the long step-by-step route, taking one class at a time at community college. And there's pros and cons to both. I think without hesitation, I would say that some med schools have a prejudice against community college classes because apparently you have to be rich to go to med school, right? So I think that's something that you need to consider, but it worked for me, and I think it can work for others.
Thank you.
And good luck. You got this.
Thank you.
Hi, I have a question. So, as an undergraduate student, what was your decision-making process?
So only one of you can go in.
Sorry, go ahead.
All right, I'll rephrase the question. So, as an undergraduate student, what was your decision-making process in choosing your prospect medical school? And to what extent did you prepare for the application process?
Well, I guess I could start with that since I just did it, the most recently. It's tough. It's tough choosing the right schools and programs to apply to. There is a lot of internal med school cutoffs. So a lot of different schools will have these hidden, unspoken, you must have this MCAT score to make it to the next step. You must have this GPA to make it to the next step. So try to find online and try to see schools that kind of will fit your kind of I guess scores. First of all, don't be scared about kind of reaching higher, but just know that it's just so competitive. For me, if I want to tell my story, I applied to 26 schools. I got it to 5, and those are the only ones that interviewed me. And I think I am a pretty good candidate. I think I have my stuff, all lined up and in life and with my goals. But even despite all that, there's just so many applicants that it's really easy for you to get lost in the shuffle of 2,000 other applicants. So really make sure that it's, your scores are kind of aligned. Make sure that if it's a public school outside of the state that you live in, that you really have a connection to that area, because there is a public school in-state bias for applicants. So consider that. And then just kind of see, what schools are kind of looking for the diversity that you kind of can offer to them in whatever facet of way that may be. And it's costly, so make sure to prepare for that as well. It's very expensive to apply to medical school, unfortunately. I don't know if anyone else wants to talk about their decision process.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat everything Alan said because I completely agree with everything you just said. I will add a couple of other points. So I took the old version of the MCAT, but I will say, like, there are some schools, like I applied to med school with just barely an acceptable MCAT score, like not at all an MCAT, like I was below average for every school I applied to on my MCAT score. It wasn't like a horrible score, but it was not strong. But I will say there are some schools that are very public about the fact that they review the whole application and don't have cutoffs. So if you happen to be a student who feels like, I have a lot of strengths, but like my score isn't one of them, and I just need to get people to read my application, and then they'll like know who I am and why I would be a good fit. If you would think of yourself in that way, then I would encourage you to read a little bit, on either online or even reach out to admissions directors, or sometimes like some schools have students on those panels who are like particularly available to help answer questions. That's like, it's a thing worth knowing about, and like it doesn't reflect on you to ask a school about what its process looks like if that's a thing that you're curious about. The other thing I will say is, in addition to the med school application process being expensive, this like goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, like med school is obviously expensive. And like coming from a family that has no money at all, like I wish that I had kind of thought about that kind of thing before applying, if that makes sense. Like there are some schools, for example, there was an out-of-state school that I applied to, that I got into, that I fell in love with, and I was like, I want to go there. This is my dream school. But like, if I had done any reading beforehand, I would have known that they give no financial aid to out-of-state students. And so I like wasted money going to my interview there, like traveling. I wasted money applying there, and I like wasted like excitement about going to the school that I just didn't make any financial sense for me, and obviously everyone's decisions are their own. And if you happen to be in a place where you're like, what, like for me, like this institution is the best fit for me, and for me and my cost benefit analysis, the financial cost of going to this place is worth like all of the other benefits, that's like totally legit. But for me, I happened to find myself, when decision time came, choosing between 2 or 3 programs that, they all seemed to me like they valued people, and they valued service, and they valued the things that I valued, and I felt like they would all be a good fit. And so really finances ended up being kind of my driving factor. And I just wish that I had kind of had that mindset going into the application process, because I think I could have been a little bit more wise in setting my own expectations. Yeah.
I'll make a plug for Cornell. Well, Cornell, they have a debt-free program. So basically, unless your parents are really wealthy, you don't pay tuition. So I pay no tuition to go to Well Cornell. So really look into that if you're cool with living in New York.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. I will also make a plug. There are some schools that do have great out-of-state financial aid and stuff. So I'm at Michigan, and I got a better package at Michigan than I got at any private school anywhere, like even institutions that have a ton of money. So like it exists, but it's worth digging into. Like, yeah.
Can I make a follow-up on my question? So your experiences are great. What age or when did you start your application process journey? Like, when did you start thinking about searching for the schools that you were applying to?
I think the process takes over a year for sure. Because they just asked for you to fill so many boxes. You have to have the XYZ of classes. You have to have the MCAT, which I would recommend you spend 3-4 months preparing for. You have to also have like hospital experience, shadowing, maybe some research. Like there's just so much that they ask for. So if you're a traditional undergrad, you really have to start thinking about this kind of process, I would say, after you're done with your sophomore year. And as far as narrowing down your list, I think that makes more sense once you've taken the MCAT and you can see, okay, I'm going to be competitive at a lot of these schools, or well, it's going to be a little bit of a reach. So let me kind of refocus my views. But it is kind of like a long-term journey. And the thing about med school applications also that most schools, a lot of schools are rolling admissions. So the later you apply, the less seats there are. So that's why it's just so to your advantage to apply as soon as the admission cycle opens. So it's such hard, and that's why I think people with privilege are so much more prepared and able to go to medical school because they just have everything set up for them already. So it will take more than a year for you to have that process set up.
Yeah, I will add that I would also factor in, hopefully this isn't the case for you, but I factored in for myself room to have to retake the MCAT because I expected myself to not do so great on it based on my experience with the SAT, which was like I took it once, didn't do so hot, knew my weaknesses, studied again, tried again, did much better. And so for the MCAT, I studied over the course, I think, of my spring semester of junior year of college. Took the MCAT, did not do so well. And so I was not a science major in undergrad. I studied global affairs and international development. And so it became very clear to me after taking the MCAT the first time, like what my weak points were, which were obvious, right? Like I had taken Bio 101 and that was essentially it. Like I had a lot of holes in my knowledge. And so I actually, having had that experience, taking the MCAT the first time, my junior spring, I was like, okay, I am going to redo my senior year schedule so that I can actually take some electives that will be useful for me to prepare for the MCAT. Obviously, that only works if you're still in college, but for me, that kind of worked out nicely because, I was going to be taking X number of college credits to graduate anyway. And so I actually took, physiology, pass-fail my senior fall. And I took it pass-fail because I was like, I'm going to be with all these gunners and I don't need this right now. But I was like, this is going to be an opportunity for me to go to class every day, learn all this information that's going to be useful for me for the MCAT that I know I'm weak on. And so after that semester, I passed the class. I actually think I wouldn't have done horribly in it, but I was like, whatever. I took the class pass-fail just so it wouldn't be a stressor. But then Christmas break, I actually I took 3 weeks of Christmas break to just hammer. and like cram, you know, the last little physics tidbit, which I don't even know if the new MCAT has that, but I just crammed like the last little snippets that I knew I needed to try again. And I did much better the second time. And so I don't know, I would advocate not just thinking about, you know, how much time does it take for my score to get in for the AMCAS Common App, but actually like, you know, how much time would it take for me to get my score back and then retake it if I decide that I would like to do that. Yeah, other than that, yeah, I would also, just to familiarize whoever listens to this or watches this later, people, to familiarize you all about the process. After you submit your common application, the, you know, AAMC has to verify your application, which essentially means like make sure you're a real person and that your transcript is real. And then, and only then, do they send your application to all the schools that you applied to. After those schools have seen your application, they'll do various amounts of screening depending on their policy, and then they'll send you a secondary application. And then only after you submitted your secondary application do they start considering you for interviews, if you happen to get a secondary application. All of this is to say that like there are waves that are pretty work intensive. I know for me, like I applied to essentially the same number of programs as Alan did, and that's a freaking lot of essays to write. Like it really is. And so I actually, for the programs that I applied to in that time when I was waiting for my AMCAS to be verified, I actually went online and kind of Googled what essay questions these schools had beforehand, knowing that they might change, but as it turns out, 0 of them changed. And so I actually started working on my essays in that downtime. That'll help me be more efficient because like Alan was saying, it's a rolling basis application. And so I would encourage doing that if you kind of want to hack the system, because I had my essays pretty much ready when my secondary applications came in, and I think that was helpful for me too.
And I can put my, I don't know, email on the chat, or if Crystal wants to distribute it. And if you have any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them individually. Also, your personal statement is such a huge part of the application that really, even if you're, you know, sometime out, start thinking about what you're going to write. And I think it's important because it really answers the question of why you're going to medical school. You know, like you want to save lives, you can save lives as anything else, really. As a lawyer, you can save lives if you do it right. So why do you want to do medical school compared to something else? That's really something that you should really have narrowed down and kind of really at ease with, so that you can write a personal statement that makes sense, and that you, when you interview, you can have a story that people will grab onto and that will make you memorable for them to say, yeah, we want him or her in our program.
Yeah, does anyone have any other questions before we end this?
Can you guys leave your emails, please, in the chat? That'd be like helpful. That's all.
All right, last call for questions. Does anyone have a question? Great. Okay. Well, thank you all for taking time out of your day to be part of this panel. And then thank you for the attendees too that showed up to watch this panel. And I will be posting this on YouTube as well. So for anyone who joined in late, if you all want to watch it later or have friends who you want to have watched this panel as well, you can see that. But yeah, thank you all again for being part of this, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much for hosting. It was great to meet everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Crystal.
You're welcome.